Right now, you think you are reading this. You think you chose to click. You think you decided to stay. But here is what the science actually suggests. By the time you became aware of that choice, your brain may already have been preparing it milliseconds or even seconds earlier. That is not a metaphor. It is based on measurement. And once you understand what that measurement means, you may never think about your own mind the same way again. In 2008, neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes and colleagues asked people in a brain scanner to make simple, spontaneous choices, such as pressing a button with the left or right hand. Their job was to remember the letter shown on a screen at the moment they decided. Haynes was not studying their hands. He was studying the gap. Because while the volunteers sat there, feeling completely free, brain activity was already showing patterns that could predict which hand they would choose before they reported becoming aware of the decision. In that study, the prediction was above chance, though far from perfect, and it appeared seconds before the reported choice. Seconds. You feel like a decision happens in a flash, a spark of will, a moment of choice. But your brain may already be moving toward the ending before your conscious mind catches up. This idea did not come out of nowhere. It built on work that had been unsettling scientists for decades. Back in 1983, physiologist Benjamin Libet ran an experiment that should have made front-page news. He recorded brain activity while people were asked to flex a wrist whenever they felt the urge. And he asked them to note the moment they first became aware of that urge. What he found cracked something open in neuroscience. Before the wrist moved, there was a burst of brain activity called the readiness potential. That part was expected, but the readiness potential began roughly 550 milliseconds before movement, while the reported conscious urge appeared later, around 200 milliseconds before movement. The brain seemed to be preparing for action before people reported becoming aware of wanting to act. Libet spent years wrestling with what that meant. He proposed that maybe free will was not in initiating the action, but in vetoing it. You might not start the action, but perhaps you could still stop it at the last moment. It was a generous interpretation. And it still left something deeply uncomfortable sitting in the room. Because if your brain is already moving before you've become aware of the decision, then who exactly is deciding? That question is not just philosophical. It has a neurological address. Your brain is not a single decision-making room. It is a network of systems working at different speeds. The prefrontal cortex is important for planning, reasoning, and control, but it is not the whole of the thinking self. Underneath and alongside it are older systems that evaluate threat, reward, habit, and emotion before conscious awareness fully catches up. These systems can begin shaping responses before you can put the experience into words. By the time a thought surfaces as something you experience, it has already been influenced by processes you did not directly observe. Researcher Ap Dijksterhuis at Radboud University studied what he called unconscious thought theory. Some of his experiments suggested that for certain complex decisions, a period of distraction could help people make choices that were at least as good as, and sometimes better than, careful, conscious deliberation. The unconscious mind in that view is not just a storage room. It is also a processing system, a powerful one that can work in parallel with conscious thought, and sometimes shape the direction before awareness arrives. But here is where it gets stranger. Your conscious mind does not just arrive late to the decision, it also edits the memory of arriving late. After the fact, you experience the feeling of having chosen. You feel authorship. You feel like the story of your decision began the moment you became aware of it, not before. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga, known for his split brain research, described a part of the brain as the interpreter. The left hemisphere has a strong tendency to explain behavior, even when the explanation is incomplete or wrong. If it does not know the real cause, it can still generate a confident story. You did not choose because of reason A, but your brain may tell you, sincerely, that you chose because of reason A. And you may believe it. This is not necessarily a flaw. It may be a feature. A brain that constantly doubted its own decisions would struggle to function. The interpreter helps keep your experience coherent. It gives you a story you can live inside. But it is a story, assembled after the fact, retold as if it had always been there. Think about a moment when you made a decision you could not fully explain. You chose a person, you took a job, you said a word you did not plan to say, and afterward you tried to explain it, and the explanation felt slightly off, like a translation from a language you do not actually speak. That gap you felt is real. The actual decision was likely shaped by a mix of memory, emotion, habit, association, threat signals, reward predictions, and patterns built over your entire life. The reasoning you reported afterward may have been your mind catching up and building a bridge between what happened and what you can consciously accept. Researchers such as Tali Sharot have shown that the brain is strongly shaped by prior beliefs and predictions, and it often resists information that clashes with them. In other words, the brain is not a neutral recorder. It is an active interpreter. So what does this mean for you right now, today? It means that when you feel a strong urge and then act on it and tell yourself you thought it through, you may be narrating something that was already underway before awareness fully arrived. It means the version of you that feels free and conscious and deliberate is real, but it may not be the whole story. It means your emotions are not interruptions to your rational decisions. They are often part of the decision-making process itself. And the conscious explanation may come afterward like a press release. And here is the strange gift inside all of this. Once you know the interpreter exists, you can watch it work. You can notice when you are building a justification rather than discovering a truth. You can slow down the moment between the urge and the story, the space where reflection and self-control still matter. Not in denying the unconscious processes beneath you, but in learning to recognize when they are speaking first. You thought you were reading this because you chose to, and maybe you did. Or maybe your brain had already started leaning that way before the feeling of choice became conscious. Either way, you stayed, and something in you already knew you would. Thanks for watching. Whether you chose to stay or your brain chose for you, I'm glad you made it to the end. See you in the next psychology video.